I'm Alice, 34 female. I live in a city apartment that's just big enough for me and my overflowing collection of books. By day, I'm a senior project manager, which is a fancy way of saying I organize chaos for a living. Timelines, budgets, and difficult stakeholders are my bread and butter. It's a demanding job, but I'm good at it, and it's allowed me to build a life for myself that I'm proud of, one that's stable and secure. That stability has always been important to me, especially since it often felt lacking in my own family, where affection and approval were commodities, not constants. For years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, planned well enough, and gave enough, I could finally secure my place at the center of my family's world. I was about to learn, in the most spectacular and public way possible, just how wrong I was. This is the story of how I planned the perfect family vacation for my parents' 40th anniversary, only to be told I wasn't important enough to attend, and how I used the very skills they always took for granted to give them a celebration they would truly never forget. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary was looming on the calendar like a national holiday. For my mother, Eleanor, it was an event that required a level of pomp and circumstance usually reserved for royal weddings. For my father, George, it was an occasion to smile, nod, and let my mother handle the details. And for my younger sister, Jessica, it was yet another opportunity to be the center of attention, even when the event wasn't about her. As for me, Alice, it was my chance to do what I always did, make everything perfect. I was the family's designated planner, the one who handled the logistics that no one else wanted to touch. For birthdays, I coordinated the gifts. For holidays, I managed the travel schedules. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who made sure the trains ran on time in our chaotic family ecosystem. This anniversary, I decided, would be my masterpiece. I wanted to give them something they couldn't possibly organize themselves. A gesture so grand it would be undeniable proof of my love and, perhaps selfishly, my value to them. I spent months researching. My parents had always dreamed of a coastal getaway, something luxurious with ocean views, gourmet food, and absolute relaxation. My dad loved boating and my mom loved spas. Jessica just loved anything that would look good on her social media feed. With that in mind, I found the perfect spot. A 5-star island resort off the coast, accessible only by a private ferry. It had everything. A marina for chartered yachts, a world-class spa, Michelin-starred restaurants, and suites with balconies overlooking the turquoise water. It was breathtakingly expensive, a significant portion of my savings, but I didn't care. This wasn't just a gift, it was a statement. I booked 4 executive suites for a long weekend, one for my parents, one for Jessica, one for my cousin Ben, who was like a brother to me, and one for myself. I arranged a private yacht charter for a day of sailing, booked a full-day spa package for my mom and Jessica, and made reservations at the resort's most exclusive restaurant for the anniversary dinner. Every detail was meticulously planned and, most importantly, paid for in full, upfront, on my credit card. I put down deposits, signed contracts, and coordinated with the resort's concierge to ensure every moment would be seamless. I even created a detailed itinerary, complete with booking confirmations and activity schedules, which I had professionally printed and placed in a beautiful leather-bound folder. This was more than a vacation, it was a project, and I managed it with the same precision I applied to my work. I was genuinely excited, buzzing with the anticipation of seeing their faces when I revealed the surprise. I imagined the moment of shock, the tears of joy from my mother, the rare, heartfelt thank you from my father. I pictured us all on that yacht, the sun on our faces, finally feeling like a family united by a happy occasion, one that I had single-handedly created. In my mind, this weekend was going to be the turning point, the moment my efforts were finally, truly seen and appreciated. That was my hope, my grand, naive, and ultimately foolish hope. The reveal was planned for our weekly family dinner, a Sunday ritual that usually felt more like a business meeting. I brought the leather folder with me, my heart thumping with a nervous rhythm. My cousin Ben was there, which I was grateful for. He was often my silent supporter in these family gatherings, the one who could see the dynamic for what it was. My sister, Jessica, was scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing dramatic. Ally about the quality of light in the restaurant. My father was talking about a difficult root canal he'd performed, and my mother was subtly critiquing the restaurant's decor. It was a typical Sunday. After we ordered, I cleared my throat. "So," I began, my voice a little shaky. "With your 40th anniversary coming up, I wanted to do something special for you." I slid the folder across the table to my parents. My dad opened it, his eyebrows raising as he read the first page. My mother leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the itinerary. There was a moment of stunned silence. "Alice," my dad said, his voice filled with genuine surprise. "A weekend at the Ocean Spire Resort? My word, this is incredible." My mother picked up the confirmation for the spa package, her usual critical expression softening for a moment. "A full day of treatments? And a suite with an ocean view?" she murmured, looking at me. "How on earth did you manage this?" For a fleeting second, I saw it, the awe, the gratitude I had been craving. I felt a warm glow spread through my chest. "I've been saving up," I said with a proud smile. "I wanted it to be perfect. Everything is taken care of. The ferry, the hotel, the yacht, the dinners, it's all booked and paid for. All you have to do is pack your bags." Jessica finally looked up from her phone, snatching a brochure from the folder. "Wow, this place is gorgeous," she said. "The photo ops will be insane." Ben gave me a wide, impressed smile from across the table. "Alice, this is amazing," he said warmly. "Seriously, you've outdone yourself." My dad stood up and gave me a rare hug. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is the most wonderful gift anyone has ever given us." My mother, for her part, simply nodded, a calculated smile on her face as she continued to study the itinerary. The warmth I felt began to cool slightly. Her reaction was more analytical than emotional, as if she were assessing a business proposal rather than accepting a heartfelt gift. But I pushed the feeling aside. It was happening. They were happy. I had done it. I had created the perfect moment. For the rest of the dinner, they buzzed with excitement, talking about what they would wear, what they would do. I sat back, content, feeling for the first time in a long time like an essential, celebrated part of my own family. The cost, the effort, the months of planning, it all felt worth it. I had no idea that the foundation of this perfect gift was already cracking, and that I was the only one who couldn't see the fault lines. The initial excitement from the anniversary gift announcement seemed to carry through the following week. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother asking for details about the resort's dress code, and from Jessica requesting the spa's treatment menu so she could pre-plan her relaxation. I answered every question, forwarded every email, and acted as their personal concierge, a role I was all too familiar with. The grand gesture had worked, or so I thought. I was included in the flurry of planning, my opinion sought on dinner attire and activity timings. It felt good, like I was the architect of their happiness, and they were finally acknowledging it. I didn't notice, at first, how the conversations subtly shifted. The group texts started to feel like they were missing context, as if discussions were happening elsewhere that I wasn't privy to. When I'd call my mom, she'd sometimes cut the conversation short, saying she was on the other line with Jessica, planning something small for the trip. "Just little details, darling," she'd say breezily. "Nothing you need to worry about." The red flags were there, fluttering just at the edge of my vision, but I was so invested in the fantasy of the perfect family weekend that I chose to ignore them. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had paid for everything. Of course, I was central to the plan. Why would I even question it? The turning point came 2 weeks before the trip, during another family dinner. This one was at my parents' house. The atmosphere felt different, charged with a strange, conspiratorial energy that didn't include me. Jessica was practically vibrating with excitement, while my mother had a smug, self-satisfied look on her face. My dad, as usual, seemed blissfully unaware, talking about his golf game. Ben hadn't been able to make it, and I felt his absence keenly. Without his grounding presence, I felt exposed, more sensitive to the subtle currents of family politics. During dinner, they talked about the trip in vague terms. They mentioned the guest list and the final headcount for the anniversary dinner I had booked. I frowned. The headcount is 5, I said, trying to sound casual. You, Dad, Jessica, Ben, and me. My mother waved a dismissive hand. Oh, we've made a few small adjustments. We've invited a few of our dearest friends to join us for the dinner. The resort was very accommodating. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. You invited other people? I asked. I booked the private dining room for a small group. I'm not sure they can handle more. Don't be silly, Alice, Eleanor said, her tone laced with that familiar condescension. It's a 5-star resort, not a diner. They can handle it. It's a celebration, after all. It's only right we share it with the people who have been with us through thick and thin. The way she said it felt pointed, as if I wasn't on that list. Jessica chimed in, not looking up from her phone as she edited a photo. It's going to be an actual party now, not just a stuffy little family thing. So much more fun. The knot in my stomach turned to a cold stone. I had poured my heart and a substantial amount of my savings into creating an intimate family experience. Now, without even consulting me, they were turning it into a social event for their friends, a party I was still expected to have paid for. But the worst was yet to come. Later in the evening, as my father was showing me a new set of golf clubs in his study, my mother and Jessica were in the living room, their voices low. My father was called away by a phone call, and I walked back towards the living room, stopping in the hallway when I heard my name. The conversation that followed was the moment everything shattered. The final, brutal blow was delivered over cocktails a few days later, just 1 week before the scheduled trip. My mother had insisted on taking Jessica and me out for a girls' night, which was her way of staging an intervention or delivering bad news under the guise of a treat. We were at a chic, overpriced bar, the kind Jessica loved. I ordered a simple glass of wine, while my mother and sister ordered elaborate, colorful cocktails. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes before my mother finally cleared her throat and placed her hand on mine, a gesture that was always a prelude to something manipulative. Alice, darling, she began, her voice smooth as silk. Your father and I are just so overwhelmed by your generosity. The anniversary trip is going to be magnificent. I nodded, taking a sip of my wine. I'm glad. I just want you to have the best time. We will, she continued, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. And because it's such a special, milestone event, we've been thinking a lot about the atmosphere. We want it to be a truly intimate and harmonious celebration. Jessica glanced at my mother, then took a long, noisy sip of her drink. This weekend is just for the people who really matter, my mother said quietly, the words dropping like ice cubes into my drink. I stared at her, my mind refusing to process what she was implying. What does that mean? I asked, my own voice barely a whisper. Jessica sighed dramatically, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway, Alice, she added, finally looking at me. It's all going to be couples and our parents' old friends. You'd just be sitting there by yourself. It would be awkward for everyone. The air left my lungs. The background noise of the bar, the clinking glasses, the low murmur of conversation, it all faded into a dull roar. They weren't just adding guests to my gift, they were uninviting me from it. I, the person who had conceived, planned, and paid for the entire event, was being told I didn't really matter. I was being excluded from my own gesture of love. I looked from my mother's carefully neutral face to my sister's smug expression. There was no remorse, no apology. This was a decision they had made together, a calculated move to push me to the periphery. For a moment, I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every sacrifice I'd ever made, every event I'd planned, every late-night call I'd de-answered. I wanted to throw my wine in their perfectly composed faces. But years of being a project manager, of handling difficult people with calm professionalism, took over. My emotions receded, replaced by a sudden, chilling clarity. I saw them not as my mother and sister, but as stakeholders in a project that had just gone spectacularly wrong, and I knew exactly how to manage a failed project. I picked up my glass, my hand steady. I looked them both in the eye and gave them a small, tight smile. Understood, I said, my voice even. I took a sip of wine, the bitter taste a perfect match for the feeling in my chest. I raised my glass slightly, a mock toast. I hope you all have a wonderful time. My mother looked relieved. Jessica just looked bored, already reaching for her phone again. They had gotten what they wanted. They thought they had won. They had no idea that I had just started to play. That night, sleep was impossible. The single word I had uttered at the bar, understood, replayed in my mind. It was a word of concession on the surface, but beneath it, a furious storm was brewing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's placid smile and my sister's dismissive shrug. Just for the people who really matter. The phrase was a brand searing itself into my consciousness. Who were these people who mattered more than their own daughter, the one who had orchestrated the entire affair? The more I thought about it, the more pieces of a painful puzzle began to click into place. I remembered the hallway conversation I had partially overheard at my parents' house just a few days prior. I had been coming back from my dad's study, and their voices, my mother's and Jessica's, were hushed but sharp, drifting from the living room. At the time, I had only caught snippets, dismissing it as their usual gossip. Now, those snippets returned with haunting clarity. "Simply won't fit in," my mother had said, her voice laced with a tone of finality. "She's so serious all the time, she'll dampen the mood." A pause, then Jessica's higher-pitched reply. "And Ben is always on her side. If she's there, he'll be there, and they'll just sit in a corner judging everyone. It'll be so draining." I had stopped in the shadows of the hallway, my hand frozen on the door frame. Dampen the mood? Judging everyone? Was that how they saw me? Not as a loving daughter or a supportive sister, but as a wet blanket, a killjoy at their party, a party I was funding. The conversation continued. "The Martins are coming, and you know how they love to dance. And your father wants to invite the Conways," my mother went on. "With Jessica's friends, there's just no room. It's a numbers game, really." "So, what are we going to do?" Jessica had asked, a hint of whine in her voice. "She paid for it all. She's going to expect to be front and center." There was a long silence. I held my breath, my ears straining. Then, my mother's voice dropped, becoming smooth and conspiratorial. "Leave it to me, darling. I'll handle Alice. I'll make it seem like it's for her own good. By the time I'm done, she'll practically be thanking us for letting her off the hook." At that moment in the hallway, a wave of nausea had washed over me. I had backed away silently, retreating to the guest bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I told myself I was misinterpreting. They couldn't be talking about me. They couldn't be that cruel. I had forced a smile, rejoined the family, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. I had chosen denial. But now, lying in my bed, the denial had shattered, leaving only the jagged edges of the truth. It wasn't an awkward numbers game. It was a deliberate, malicious exclusion. They weren't worried about me feeling left out. They were engineering it. They saw my gift not as an act of love, but as a transaction. They had taken the funds, and now they were cutting out the investor. The anger that had been a slow burn was now a raging fire. It wasn't just about the trip anymore. It was about a lifetime of slights, of being the responsible one while Jessica was the fun one. It was about my successes being treated as expectations, while Jessica's smallest achievements were celebrated with fanfare. I was the family bedrock, solid and dependable, and they had taken me for granted for so long that they had forgotten the bedrock could shift. They had forgotten that the person who builds something also knows exactly how to take it apart. I got out of bed and went to my home office. The leather-bound folder with the itinerary was on my desk. I opened it, the crisp pages feeling like a mockery. All my hard work, all my good intentions, twisted into a weapon to be used against me. I pulled out my laptop and opened the file where I kept all the project details, contracts, payment confirmations, contact information for every vendor. The resort concierge, the yacht captain, the spa manager, the restaurant's event coordinator. My name, Alice, was on every single document. My credit card number was on every single payment record. A cold, calm resolve settled over me. My mother thought she could handle me. Jessica thought I would just roll over and accept my place on the sidelines. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I was. I wasn't just their daughter and sister. I was a senior project manager. My job was to assess risks, manage resources, and ensure projects were executed according to the plan. And when stakeholders changed the scope of a project so drastically that it became untenable, my job was to take decisive action. This family vacation was no longer my project. It was a hostile takeover, and I was about to initiate a full-scale project cancellation. The first email I drafted was to the resort's head of guest relations. My fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, my earlier grief and anger now channeled into focused, professional prose. I was no longer the hurt daughter. I was a client, and I had a problem that needed solving. The plan began to form in my mind, not as a messy act of emotional revenge, but as a clean, logical, and irreversible sequence of events. Each step was a line item in a new project plan. Project title: Operation Just Desserts. Objective: to return the vor and show them what happens when they underestimate the person who signs the checks. The storm inside me had passed. In its place was a quiet, unshakable certainty. They wanted a weekend for the people who really matter. I was about to make sure they got exactly what they deserved. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The emotional fog of hurt and betrayal had lifted, replaced by the sharp, invigorating focus of a complex problem to be solved. My apartment, usually a cozy sanctuary, now felt like a command center. With a large cup of black coffee by my side, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to dismantle the perfect gift, piece by meticulous piece. The key to my plan was the digital paper trail. In my profession, documentation is everything. Every decision, every payment, every communication is recorded. I had applied the same rigor to planning this trip, which meant I held all the cards. I had a dedicated folder on my cloud drive labeled Parents' 40th Anniversary. Inside were subfolders for the resort, the yacht, the spa, and the restaurants. Each contained PDFs of invoices, email confirmations, and digital copies of the contracts I had signed. My name, Alice, was the legal and financial authority on every single document. My first target was the biggest one, the Ocean Spire Resort. I had the direct email address for the senior guest relations manager, a woman named Isabella who I had corresponded with to arrange some of the finer details. I pulled up the contract. As I suspected, there was a cancellation clause. Due to the high demand for their executive suites, cancellations made within 7 days of the check-in date would forfeit the 50% deposit. It was a significant amount of money, but at this point, it was a price I was more than willing to pay for my peace of mind. Losing the deposit felt less like a loss and more like an investment in my own self-respect. I drafted a polite, professional email to Isabella. Subject: cancellation request, booking ref 74A38912, Alice my last name. Dear Isabella, I hope this email finds you well. Due to unforeseen personal circumstances, I must regretfully cancel the entire booking under the reference number above for the upcoming weekend. This includes all 4 executive suites: check-in, date, checkout, date. I understand that as per the terms of our agreement, this cancellation falls within the 7-day window, and I will therefore forfeit the deposit. Please proceed with the cancellation and confirm once it has been processed. I also request that you reverse the charge for the remaining balance that was pre-authorized on my credit card. Thank you for your understanding and for all your assistance during the planning process. Sincerely, Alice. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came back in less than an hour. It was professional and understanding. Isabella confirmed the cancellation of all 4 suites and the reversal of the pending charge. The deposit was forfeited, as expected. Step 1 was complete. The luxurious rooms with ocean views no longer existed. Next up, the yacht charter. This was a smaller, independent company. I called the number on the invoice. A man with a gruff, friendly voice answered. I explained the situation, again citing unforeseen personal circumstances. He was even more understanding than the resort. "Ah, life throws you curveballs, doesn't it?" he said. "No worries. We have a waiting list a mile long for that vessel. I can refund your deposit in full, no problem at all." I was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" "That's very generous of you," I said. "Well, you gave us plenty of notice," he replied. "And we're not in the business of keeping folks' money for nothing. The refund should be back on your card in a few business days." I thanked him profusely and hung up. Step 2 was complete, and I was even getting some money back. The image of my father, an avid sailor, standing on the dock expecting a private yacht, only to find nothing, flickered in my mind. A small, grim smile touched my lips. The third target was the spa. My mother and Jessica's full day of relaxation. I had a direct email for the spa director. I used the same polite, vague reason for cancellation. The spa had a stricter 48-hour policy, and since I was outside that window, they confirmed the full refund of the hefty deposit I had paid for their most exclusive package. The massages, the facials, the aromatherapy sessions, all of it vanished with a simple click of my mouse. Finally, I addressed the anniversary dinner. This was the centerpiece of the celebration, the event they had expanded to include their important friends. I had booked a private dining room at the resort's most acclaimed restaurant. My cancellation of the hotel suites didn't automatically cancel the dinner reservation, as it was handled by a separate department. I called the restaurant's event coordinate. Or, I explained that the family trip had been canceled and that we would no longer require the reservation for, as I checked my notes, a party of 12. The coordinator was audibly disappointed but professional. "I see," she said. "We were so looking forward to hosting your parents' celebration." "As were we," I replied, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "Unfortunately, it's just not possible anymore." Because the reservation was for a private room, there was a cancellation fee, but it was minor. I authorized it, and just like that, the grand anniversary dinner was gone. The only thing left was the private ferry, which was operated by the resort and was part of the main booking. With the suites canceled, their names were no longer on the passenger manifest. They wouldn't even be able to set foot on the island. The entire dismantling process took less than 2 hours. Every confirmation of cancellation that landed in my inbox felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of my power and my finances. I moved all the cancellation emails into a new subfolder titled Project Closure. Then, I called my cousin Ben. I told him everything. The conversation in the hallway, the cocktail bar ambush, and the steps I had just taken. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Wow, Alice," he said finally, his voice a mixture of shock and admiration. "I am so sorry they did that to you, but honestly, good for you, they've been walking all over you for years." "I just snapped," I admitted. "I couldn't take it anymore." "You did the right thing," he said firmly. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, looking at the empty itinerary on my screen, "I wait." The days leading up to the anniversary weekend were strangely quiet. I expected a barrage of calls or texts from my mother or Jessica asking for more details or making more demands. But there was nothing. It was an eerie silence, the calm before the storm. I realized they probably felt they had everything they needed. They had the itinerary I had created, they had the confirmation numbers I had provided, and most importantly, they had successfully removed the one person they considered an inconvenience. In their minds, the project was proceeding perfectly according to their revised plan. They were so confident in my competence, so used to me handling everything flawlessly, that it never occurred to them that I could undo my own work. My silence was not a sign of defeat, it was a strategic absence. I let them believe they were in control. I went to work, focused on my projects, and spent my evenings reading and catching up with friends. For the first time in months, I wasn't managing my family's expectations. The relief was immense. I felt lighter, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The money I had lost on the main deposit felt insignificant compared to the freedom I was gaining. On the Friday the trip was supposed to begin, I took the day off. Not to mope, but to celebrate my own independence. I went to a museum, had a long, leisurely lunch at a restaurant I'd always wanted to try, and bought myself a beautiful, expensive fountain pen, something I wanted for no other reason than it brought me joy. As I was walking home, my phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Jessica. It was a selfie of her, my mother, and my father in the car. They were all beaming, my dad at the wheel, my mother in the passenger seat, and Jessica in the back making a peace sign. The caption read, "On our way to paradise. So excited. Wish you were here." Winking face, that winking emoji was like a final twist of the knife. It was smug, condescending, and utterly dismissive. It wasn't an olive branch, it was a final taunt. They weren't just excluding me, they were gloating about it. I looked at the picture, at their smiling, oblivious faces, and I felt nothing but a cold sense of detachment. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. They were driving toward a paradise that no longer existed, a weekend that had been erased from reality. Their excitement was based on a foundation of lies and assumptions, and it was about to crumble. I knew their approximate schedule because I had planned it. They would drive 2 hours to the coast to reach the private marina. The ferry was scheduled to depart at 3:00 p.m. Check-in at the resort was at 4:00 p.m. Their spa appointments were for the following morning, and the now non-existent anniversary party was that night. I pictured them in the car, my mother probably giving my father directions he didn't need, and Jessica curating a playlist for the trip. They would be talking about their friends who were meeting them there, blissfully unaware that those friends would also be turned away. As the afternoon wore on, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the city go by. At 2:45 p.m., I imagined them arriving at the marina, luggage in tow, looking for the ferry to the Ocean Spire Resort. At 3:00 p.m., I pictured them standing at the dock, watching the ferry depart without them. At 3:15 p.m., my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was my dad. I let it ring. Let them scramble. Let them experience the panic of a plan falling apart, a feeling I knew all too well, though usually on their behalf. He called again. I ignored it again. A flurry of texts came through. Dad, Alice, call me. There's a problem at the dock. Dad, they're saying our names aren't on the passenger list. They're saying the hotel booking was canceled. Dad, what is going on? Call me now. Then, a text from my mother, her tone shifting from confusion to command. Mom, Alice, there has been a terrible mistake with the resort. You need to call them immediately and sort this out. Our friends will be here any minute. And finally, from Jessica. Jessica, OMG, my phone is dying and the ferry guy is being a total jerk. Did you forget to confirm or something? This is so embarrassing. I read the messages, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across my face. I had not forgotten to confirm. I had, with absolute precision, unconfirmed. They were stranded, confused, and embarrassed. The perfect weekend was already a disaster, and they hadn't even left the mainland. I let them stew in their confusion for a little longer, sipping my tea. I had planned every detail of the trip, and I had planned every detail of its cancellation with the same care. They had wanted a weekend just for the people who really mattered. It seemed, at least for now, that the guest list was down to 0. After a few more frantic, unanswered calls, I knew the big one was coming. My dad would be the one to finally get through to me, the one tasked by my mother to fix the mess. I put my teacup down, took a deep, calming breath, and prepared to answer the phone. The confrontation was about to begin, right on schedule. I let another 10 minutes pass, giving their panic enough time to ripen into full-blown anger. I imagined the scene at the dock, my mother's face, a mask of fury, my sister pouting, her perfect selfie backdrop ruined, and my poor father caught in the crossfire, trying to reason with a ferry operator who had no record of their existence. The other guests, their friends, would have started arriving by now, adding a layer of public humiliation to the private disaster. The thought brought me a grim, satisfying sense of justice. Finally, my phone rang again with my father's name. This time I answered, keeping my voice calm and neutral as if I were taking a routine business call. Hello, Alice. My father's voice was a frantic mix of anger and desperation. Thank God, what is going on? We're at the dock and they're saying everything has been canceled. The hotel, the ferry, everything. They said they got an email from you. He was speaking loudly, and I could hear my mother's indignant voice in the background, shouting, "Tell her to fix this. Tell her to fix it now." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat. There's no mistake, Dad, I said calmly. I canceled everything. The line went dead quiet. I could practically hear him processing my words, the cogs in his brain turning as he tried to reconcile what I was saying with the daughter he thought he knew. You, what? He stammered. You canceled it. Why on earth would you do that? This is our 40th anniversary. I know, I replied, my voice still even. I also know that I was uninvited from the celebration I planned and paid for. Mom and Jessica made that very clear. I heard a muffled sound as my dad presumably covered the phone to relay this information to my mother. Her shriek was so loud I could hear it clearly anyway. "Give me that phone," she screeched. The phone was passed over, and my mother's voice, sharp and venomous, drilled into my ear. "Alice, what is the meaning of this? This is the most selfish, childish, and manipulative thing you have ever done. Our friends are here. We are all standing here like fools. You will call that resort back right now, and you will fix this." I took a deep breath. The old Alice would have crumbled. The old Alice would have apologized, scrambled, and tried to fix the mess she was being blamed for. But the new Alice was done. "No," I said, the single word clear and firm. "I don't think I will." "What do you mean, no?" she sputtered, her voice rising in disbelief. "I mean no. The bookings were in my name. The payments were from my account. I am perfectly within my rights to cancel a service I paid for, especially when the recipients of the gift decide the gift giver isn't welcome." "But it was a gift," she yelled. "You don't take back a gift." "You're right," I said. "You don't, but you also don't take a gift, spit on the person who gave it to you, and then expect them to keep paying for your party. That's not how gifts work. That's called theft." The line was silent again. I had never, in my entire life, spoken to my mother this way. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. This direct confrontation was new territory for both of us. My dad's call came first, as the title of this story goes, asking me to fix this now. I smiled and replied, "The only thing that needs fixing is your assumption that I work for you." Jessica snatched the phone next. "Alice, you have ruined everything," she wailed, her voice cracking with theatrical despair. "My weekend is ruined, my content is ruined, everyone is staring at us. How could you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that held no humor. "You want to talk about cruel, Jessica? Let's talk about telling your own sister she wouldn't enjoy her parents' anniversary party because she would be awkward to have around. Let's talk about sitting there while our mother told me the trip was just for the people who really matter. Was that not cruel?" She had no answer for that. All she could do was sputter about how I was overreacting and being dramatic. I had heard it all before. My feelings were always dramatic, my reactions always too much. I was done listening to it. "Put Dad back on the phone," I said, my voice hardening. There was another fumbled exchange before my father's weary voice returned. "Alice," he said, his tone softer now, defeated. "What do we do? Everyone is here." "That sounds like a project management problem," I said coolly. "And I'm officially off the project. You have a group of people at a dock with no transportation and no accommodation. You'll need to find a solution. Maybe check for last-minute hotel availability in town. I'm sure with your and Mom's resourcefulness, you'll figure something out." "But the money, Alice, the gift," he trailed off. "The gift was a weekend trip for our family. You, Mom, me, Jessica, and Ben," I clarified. "When the guest list changed and I was removed from it, the terms of the gift were violated. The gift became null and void. The money I was able to get back has been returned to my savings account. The non-refundable deposit for the hotel is the price I was willing to pay to learn a very valuable lesson." He sighed, a long, heavy sound of resignation. He knew I was right. He knew he had stood by and let my mother and sister walk all over me, and now he was facing the consequences. "I see," was all he could manage. "Well," I said, a final note of cheerful finality in my voice, "I have to go. I have my own weekend plans. I hope you all have the anniversary you deserve." With that, I hung up. I blocked their numbers, my father's, my mother S, and my sister S. I turned my phone off, walked into my living room, and poured myself a glass of very good wine. The storm had broken, and I was left standing in the calm, quiet, and liberating aftermath. Turning my phone back on the following Monday felt like defusing a bomb. I was met with a flood of notifications, dozens of missed calls from my parents, and a string of increasingly vitriolic text messages from Jessica. There were also a few from extended family members, clearly recruited by my mother to guilt-trip me. I ignored them all and found the one I was looking for, a message from my cousin, Ben. "Ben, heard through the grapevine that there was some drama this weekend. Hope you're okay. Call me when you can." I called him immediately. So, he said, skipping the small talk. My mom called your mom to wish them a happy anniversary, and apparently she got an earful. The story is that you had some kind of breakdown and spitefully ruined their perfect weekend for no reason. I laughed. That sounds about right. That's the narrative I expected. So what really happened? He asked. I told him about the phone calls, the yelling, and my final sign-off. He whistled. You hung up on them and then blocked them. Alice, that's epic. It felt necessary, I said. What did they end up doing? From what I can piece together, Ben explained, it was a total catastrophe. The Conways and the Martins, their important friends, were furious. They'd driven all that way for nothing. Dad tried to find another hotel for everyone, but it was a holiday weekend. Everything was booked solid. They ended up having a miserable, tense dinner at some roadside chain restaurant before everyone just gave up and drove home. He paused. Jessica apparently had a full-on meltdown on the curb. Something about her social media followers expecting luxury island content. I couldn't help but feel a deep, satisfying sense of schadenfreude. The public humiliation was a consequence they hadn't foreseen. They were so focused on crafting their perfect, exclusive experience that they never considered the possibility of it backfiring so spectacularly. The next few weeks were a lesson in radio silence. I maintained my blockade, refusing to engage with any attempts at communication from my immediate family. The silence was clarifying. Without their constant, low-level demands and criticisms, my life felt calmer. I poured my energy into my work. My friendships, and myself. I reconnected with old friends, took a weekend trip of my own to a quiet cabin in the woods, and rediscovered the joy of doing things for myself by myself. About a month after the dock debacle, as Ben had christened it, I received a letter in the mail. It was a handwritten card from my father. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Alice, your mother is still too angry to speak, and your sister is your sister, but I needed to write this. The last month has been quiet, too quiet. It has given me a lot of time to think about what happened. You were right. I stood by and let them treat you poorly, not just about the trip, but for years. It was easier for me to keep the peace than to do the right thing and stand up for you. I see that now. I saw your gift as a solution, not as something that came from your heart, and I let your mother and sister corrupt it. I am ashamed of my weakness and my silence. I am sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope that one day you and I can talk. Love, Dad. I read the letter twice. It was the most honest and accountable thing he had ever said to me. There were no excuses, no blame shifting, just a simple, profound apology. It didn't erase years of hurt, but it was a start. It was a crack of light in a door I had slammed shut. I didn't reply immediately. I let his words sit with me for a few days. I thought about what I wanted my future to look like. Did I want to cut them all out forever? Or did I want to build something new, with healthier boundaries and mutual respect? My mother and sister had made their position clear. They saw me as a utility, a resource to be used. Until they could see me as a person, there was no room for them in my life. My father, however, had shown a glimmer of change. A week later, I sent him a short text message. Thank you for the letter. I appreciate it. I'm not ready to talk to Mom or Jessica, but I would be willing to have coffee with you next week. He replied almost instantly. Dad, thank you, Alice. Just tell me when and where. We met at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. It was awkward at first, but we slowly started to talk. He told me that my mother and Jessica were still painting me as the villain of the story, but that fewer and fewer people were buying it. The friends who had been stranded at the dock had been furious with them, not me, for the lack of planning and the public embarrassment. Jessica's social media had taken a hit, with some followers calling her out for being entitled after she posted a vague, whiny story about her ruined vacation. He told me he had started standing up to my mother, questioning her narrative and refusing to participate in the Blame Alice campaign. It was causing a lot of tension at home, but he said it was necessary. Our conversation didn't magically fix everything, but it was the beginning of a new foundation, one built on honesty instead of obligation. My relationship with my father is still a work in progress, but it's more real now than it has ever been. As for my mother and sister, I have not spoken to them since that day. I've heard through the grapevine that they are planning another, smaller anniversary celebration for my parents later this year. I have no idea who is planning it, and more importantly, I have no idea who is paying for it. And for the first time in my life, I am blissfully, wonderfully, and completely okay with that. I am no longer the family's project manager. I've been promoted to CEO of my own life.